The lantern light barely reached the back corner of Nathan Emerson's stable, but the glint of something that did not belong caught his eye as he stepped through the doorway with his saddle slung over one shoulder. He froze, his hand instinctively moving toward the pistol at his hip before his eyes adjusted enough to make out the shape of a woman curled up in the hay, her dark hair spread across the golden straw like spilled ink. "Hey," he called out, his voice firm but not unkind. "You need to wake up now." The woman stirred, then jolted upright with a gasp, her green eyes wide with fear as they locked onto his face. She scrambled backward against the wooden wall, her dress torn at the shoulder and covered in dust from what must have been hard traveling. Nathan raised his free hand in a calming gesture, setting the saddle down slowly. "Easy now. I am not going to hurt you," he said, taking in her appearance more carefully. She looked to be in her early 20s, with a face that would have been beautiful if not for the exhaustion and terror etched into her features. "But you are on my property, and I would like to know why." The woman's breathing came in short, rapid bursts as she studied him, her hands gripping the hay beneath her. For a long moment she said nothing, and Nathan wondered if she might bolt. Then her shoulders sagged and tears welled up in her eyes. "I had nowhere safe to go," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Please, I know I should not be here, but I saw your stable from the road and it was getting dark, and I just needed somewhere to rest where nobody would find me." Nathan's jaw tightened. It was late September in 1878, and the nights in Northern California were getting cold. Willits was not a large town, barely more than a few hundred souls clustered along the stagecoach route, but it saw its share of trouble. A woman alone on the roads was in danger from more than just the weather. "Who is looking for you?" he asked, keeping his voice level. She shook her head quickly, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "I cannot tell you. If you know you might be in danger too, I should go. I am sorry for trespassing." She started to rise, but her legs gave out beneath her, and she collapsed back into the hay with a small cry of pain. Nathan moved forward without thinking, catching her arm to steady her. Up close, he could see she was shaking, whether from cold or fear or exhaustion he could not tell. Probably all three. Her skin was cool to the touch, and when she looked up at him, he saw desperation so raw it made his chest ache. "When did you last eat?" he asked. She blinked at him, seeming surprised by the question. Yesterday morning, I think, maybe the day before." "I am not sure anymore." He made his decision quickly. Nathan had never been the kind of man who could turn away someone in need, even when common sense might have dictated otherwise. His ranch was small, just 40 acres with a modest house he had built himself, but it was his, and he would be damned if he let a starving woman wander off into the night. "Come on," he said, offering his hand. "Let us get you inside and get some food in you, then we can figure out what to do." She stared at his hand as if it were some kind of trick. "Why would you help me? You do not even know me." "Because you need help," Nathan said simply. "My mother raised me better than to leave someone hungry and afraid in my stable. Now come on before you fall over again." After a moment's hesitation, she placed her hand in his. Her fingers were ice cold and he could feel them trembling. Nathan pulled her gently to her feet, keeping a steady grip on her arm as he guided her out of the stable and across the yard to his house. The autumn wind had picked up, carrying the scent of pine from the mountains that rose to the east of his property. Inside, Nathan lit the lamps and stoked the fire in the hearth while the woman stood uncertainly near the door, looking like she might run at any moment. His house was simple but clean. A single large room that served as kitchen, dining area, and living space, with a bedroom partitioned off at the back and a small loft above where he sometimes stored supplies. "Sit," he said, gesturing to one of the 2 chairs at his table. "I have stew left from dinner. It is still warm." She moved slowly to the chair and lowered herself into it, her eyes never leaving him as he ladled thick beef stew into a bowl and set it in front of her with a spoon and a chunk of bread. For a moment she just stared at the food, then she picked up the spoon with shaking hands and began to eat. She tried to go slowly at first, but hunger won out, and soon she was eating in desperate gulps. Nathan poured her a cup of water from the pitcher on his counter and set it beside her bowl, then leaned against the wall with his arms crossed, giving her space while she ate. He was a tall man, just over 6 feet, with dark brown hair and gray eyes that his mother used to say could see right through to a person's soul. At 28, he had been ranching on his own for 5 years, ever since his father had died and left him this property. It was a hard, lonely life most of the time, but he had never minded solitude. This woman, though, with her haunted eyes and desperate flight, had brought something into his quiet world that he could not quite name. Trouble, certainly, but something else too. A need to protect, maybe, or just basic human compassion awakened by her vulnerability. When she finally set down her spoon, the bowl scraped clean, she looked up at him with tears in her eyes again. "Thank you," she whispered. "I cannot remember the last time someone was kind to me." "What is your name?" Nathan asked gently. She hesitated, then seemed to decide that much could not hurt. "Sarah. Sarah Turner, Nathan Emerson," he replied. "And you are safe here, Sarah. Whatever you are running from, it is not getting through that door tonight." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks and she covered her face with her hands. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs, and Nathan felt his heart twist. He moved to the table and sat down in the other chair, reaching out to touch her shoulder carefully. "It is all right," he said quietly. "You are safe now." It took several minutes for her crying to subside. When she finally lowered her hands, her face was blotchy and red, but some of the terrible tension had gone out of her shoulders. She wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand, then met his gaze. "I should tell you," she said, her voice hoarse. "I should tell you what I am running from, because if they come here, you deserve to know why." Nathan waited, not pushing her, just letting her find her words in her own time. Sarah took a shaky breath. "My father died 6 months ago. He had a ranch, not large but profitable, about 50 miles south of here near Ukiah. When he died, everything went to me, his only child. But my uncle, my father's brother, decided he had more right to the property than I did. He tried to force me to marry his son, my cousin, so the ranch would stay in the family. When I refused, She paused, her hands clenching into fists on the table. "He said he would make sure I had no choice. He locked me in my room and told me the wedding would happen whether I agreed or not." Nathan felt anger kindle in his chest. "How did you get away?" "The housekeeper, Mrs. Chen. She had been with my family since I was a child. She gave me the key and helped me sneak out 3 nights ago. I have been traveling on foot ever since, staying off the main roads, sleeping wherever I could find shelter. I was afraid to go to the law in Ukiah because my uncle has friends there, men who would send me right back to him." She looked down at her hands. "I do not know where I am going. I just knew I had to get away." "Your ranch," Nathan said carefully. "It is legally yours," she nodded. "My father had a will drawn up by a lawyer in San Francisco. Everything was done properly, but my uncle does not care about legal documents. He thinks because I am a woman, I have no right to own land, no right to make my own choices." Nathan was quiet for a moment, thinking. The law in California was clear enough on property rights, even for women. But Sarah was right that having the law on her side did not always mean much, especially when dealing with men who had local influence and were willing to use force to get what they wanted. "You are welcome to stay here," he said finally. "As long as you need. I have a spare room upstairs in the loft. It is not much, but it is warm and dry, and nobody will bother you here." Sarah's eyes widened. "I cannot ask you to do that. If my uncle finds out where I am, he will come for me, and I do not want you caught in the middle of this." "You are not asking. I am offering," Nathan said firmly, "and I can handle myself if your uncle shows up. But honestly, if you have been traveling on foot for 3 days and staying off the main roads, I doubt anyone could have tracked you here. Willits is not exactly on the way to anywhere." A small, sad smile crossed her face. "That is what I was hoping." Nathan stood up and moved to the ladder that led to the loft. "Come on. Let me show you where you can sleep." Sarah followed him up the ladder slowly, her movements stiff with exhaustion. The loft was small but clean, with a narrow bed pushed against one wall and a window that looked out over the hills to the east. Nathan had used it mostly for storage, but he had kept a bed up here for the rare occasions when his brother visited from Sacramento. "The sheets are clean," he said. "I will bring up an extra blanket. It gets cold at night." Sarah looked around the small space, then back at him. "Why are you doing this?" she asked quietly. "You do not know me. You do not know if I am telling the truth. I could be lying about everything." Nathan met her eyes steadily. "Are you?" "No," she said immediately. "No, I am not lying, but you have no way to know that." "I know enough," Nathan said. "I know you were hungry and scared and alone. I know somebody hurt you enough to make you run. That is all I need to know for now." He paused at the top of the ladder. "The rest can wait until morning. Get some sleep, Sarah. You are safe here." He climbed back down and busied himself banking the fire and checking that the doors were locked. It was not a habit he usually bothered with, living as far from town as he did, but tonight it seemed prudent. When he finally made his way to his own bedroom, he lay awake for a long time, listening to the small sounds of Sarah moving around in the loft above him, getting settled for the night. He had told her she was safe, and he meant it. But as he stared up at the dark ceiling, Nathan wondered what he had gotten himself into. He was not a man who looked for trouble, but he had a feeling trouble might be coming his way regardless of what he wanted. The next morning dawned clear and cold. Nathan woke early as always, pulled on his work clothes, and started a fire in the hearth before heading out to tend to his animals. He had 3 horses, a dozen chickens, and 2 milk cows that needed attention every day, and the work did not stop just because he had a guest. When he came back inside an hour later with fresh milk and eggs, Sarah was sitting at his table, looking uncertain. She had clearly tried to tidy herself up, smoothing down her hair and brushing the dust from her dress, but she still looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes. "Good morning," Nathan said, setting the basket of eggs on the counter. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in days," Sarah admitted. "Thank you again for letting me stay. I know I keep saying that, but I truly mean it." "No need to keep thanking me," Nathan said, starting to prepare breakfast. "You are welcome here." He cracked eggs into his skillet and set bacon to frying, the familiar morning routine soothing in its normalcy. "I have been thinking about your situation. If your ranch is legally yours, you have options. You could go to a lawyer in a different town, somewhere your uncle does not have influence. File a complaint about what he tried to do. Get an injunction to keep him away from you and off your property." Sarah's expression turned bitter. "Even if I did all that, it would take months, maybe years to resolve. And in the meantime, where would I live? I cannot go back to the ranch, not while he is there. And I have no money, nothing but the clothes I am wearing. My uncle made sure of that." Nathan flipped the bacon, thinking. "You could stay here," he said. "Work for me in exchange for room and board. I could use help around the ranch, and it would give you time to figure out your next steps without having to worry about where your next meal is coming from." Sarah stared at him. "You would trust me to work for you?" "Again, You barely know me." "Then I will get to know you," Nathan said simply. He plated the food and brought it to the table, sitting down across from her. "Look, I am not going to pretend this is purely charitable on my part. Running this place alone is hard work, and having an extra pair of hands would make things easier. But mostly, I just think you deserve a chance to get back on your feet without having to look over your shoulder every minute." Sarah picked up her fork, but she did not start eating immediately. Instead, she studied his face, her green eyes searching for something. "You are a good man, Nathan Emerson. I am not sure I have met many of those." "I am just a man," Nathan said, "trying to do the right thing." They ate in comfortable silence for a while. The food was simple but filling, and Nathan noticed that Sarah's hands were steadier this morning, some of her strength beginning to return. When they had finished, she helped him clear the dishes without being asked, moving around his small kitchen with careful efficiency. "So what kind of work needs doing?" she asked, drying the last plate and setting it on the shelf. Nathan considered. She was still weak from her ordeal, and he did not want to push her too hard. "Can you cook?" "Well enough," Sarah said. "My mother taught me before she died, and Mrs. Chen made sure I knew my way around a kitchen even after I inherited the ranch." "Then that would be a help," Nathan said. "I can manage for myself, but I will admit my cooking is pretty basic. Beyond that, there are always chores around a ranch. Chickens to feed, eggs to collect, vegetables in the garden that need harvesting before the frost comes. Nothing too strenuous while you are still recovering your strength." Sarah nodded. "I can do that. I grew up on a ranch, remember? I know the work." "Good," Nathan said. "But today you should rest. Get your strength back. There is no rush." "I would rather work," Sarah said firmly. "Sitting still just gives me time to think, and right now my thoughts are not good company." Nathan understood that. He had felt the same way after his father died, losing himself in hard physical labor to avoid facing his grief. "All right then, let me show you around." He took her out to the barn first, introducing her to his horses. The big bay gelding, Duke, who was his primary riding horse. The sturdy gray mare, Willow, who he used for ranch work. And the young chestnut filly, Penny, who he was training to sell next spring. Sarah approached them carefully, holding out her hand for each horse to smell before gently stroking their noses. "They are beautiful," she said softly. "My father bred horses. He taught me to ride before I could properly walk." "Do you miss it?" Nathan asked. "The ranch, I mean, not your uncle, but the life." Sarah's expression grew wistful. "Every day, that ranch was my home my whole life. My father built it from nothing, and I always planned to carry on his work after he was gone. I had ideas, plans for expanding the breeding program, for buying more land." She shook her head. "And then he died and my uncle appeared and all those dreams just crumbled." "Maybe they do not have to stay crumbled," Nathan said. "You are young. You have time to rebuild." "Maybe," Sarah said, but she did not sound convinced. They spent the morning working together, falling into an easy rhythm. Sarah collected eggs while Nathan mucked out the stalls. She helped him harvest the last of the squash and pumpkins from his garden, while he repaired a section of fence that had come loose. It was peaceful work, and Nathan found himself enjoying her company more than he had expected to. She was quick and capable, needing little instruction, and she moved around the ranch with the confidence of someone who had grown up doing this kind of work. But more than that, she had an easy way about her when she relaxed, a quiet humor that emerged in small comments and observations that made him smile. By midday, they were both ready for a break. Nathan showed Sarah where he kept his supplies and let her take over the kitchen while he went to check on his cattle in the far pasture. When he returned an hour later, the smell of fresh bread and vegetable soup greeted him, and his small house felt more like a home than it had in years. "This is amazing," he said, sitting down to the meal she had prepared. "Where did you learn to make bread like this, Mrs. Chen?" Sarah said with a small smile. "She was a wonderful cook. She said even if I owned the ranch, I should know how to feed myself properly." Her smile faded. "I hope she is all right. I worry that my uncle might have punished her for helping me escape." "If she has been with your family for years, she probably knows how to handle herself," Nathan said gently. "And if your uncle has any sense, he would not want to lose a good housekeeper over this." "My uncle is not known for his good sense," Sarah muttered, but she nodded and seemed to take some comfort from Nathan's words. The days began to settle into a pattern. Sarah took over most of the cooking and household chores, and Nathan taught her some of the heavier ranch work, finding that she was more than capable of handling it. She learned to milk the cows, to mend harnesses, to help him move the cattle between pastures. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, sometimes talking, sometimes just enjoying the comfortable silence. Nathan found himself looking forward to those evenings more and more. Sarah had a sharp mind and a wry sense of humor that came out more as she began to feel safe. She would tell him stories about growing up on her father's ranch, about the horses they had bred, about her father's dreams for the property. In turn, Nathan told her about his own life, about his father who had died of a heart attack one winter morning, about his brother who had gone east to seek his fortune in the city, about the quiet satisfaction he found in working the land. 2 weeks passed, then 3. The autumn colors deepened, and the nights grew colder. Nathan gave Sarah some of his mother's old dresses that he had kept in a trunk, and she altered them to fit. She began to look healthier, the hollows in her cheeks filling out, the dark circles under her eyes fading. And something else began to grow between them, something neither of them spoke about but both of them felt. It was in the way Nathan's heart would lift when he came in from the fields and saw Sarah in the kitchen, the way his hand would linger when he passed her a tool or helped her over a rough patch of ground. It was in the way Sarah's eyes would light up when he walked into a room, the way she would laugh at his jokes, the way she leaned just a little closer when they sat by the fire at night. Nathan tried not to think about it too much. Sarah was under his protection, and he did not want to take advantage of that. She had come to him vulnerable and afraid, and he would not abuse her trust by pushing for something she might not want. But it was getting harder to ignore the feelings that stirred in him every time he looked at her. It was nearly a month after Sarah's arrival when the first snow came. Nathan woke to find the world blanketed in white, and when Sarah came down from the loft, she stopped at the window with a small gasp of delight. "It is beautiful," she said, pressing her hand against the glass. Nathan came to stand beside her, close enough that he could smell the soap she used to wash her hair. "First snow always is. By January you will be tired of it," she laughed, and the sound went straight to his heart. "Maybe, but right now it is magical." They worked together that day to prepare for the winter, bringing in extra firewood, checking that the barn was secure, making sure the animals had adequate shelter. It was hard work, but they moved together like they had been partners for years rather than weeks, anticipating each other's needs, working in wordless harmony. That night, Sarah made a special dinner, using the last of the fresh vegetables and some of the beef Nathan had butchered earlier in the week. They ate by firelight, and when they were done, Sarah did not immediately get up to clear the dishes. Instead, she sat back in her chair and looked at Nathan across the table. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly. Nathan felt his stomach tighten with apprehension. "What is it?" "I have been thinking about my ranch, about what you said weeks ago about getting a lawyer, about fighting for what is mine." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "You were right. I cannot just let my uncle steal everything my father worked for, everything he wanted me to have. I need to fight back. That is good, Nathan said, though he felt a strange sinking feeling in his chest. If Sarah went to fight for her ranch, she would leave, and he was surprised by how much the thought of her leaving hurt. But I cannot do it alone, Sarah continued. I need help. Legal help, certainly, but also just someone to stand with me, someone to support me. She met his eyes. Nathan, you have been so kind to me, given me so much, and I know I have no right to ask for more, but I am going to ask anyway. Would you come with me? Would you help me take back my home? Nathan's heart was pounding. He wanted to say yes immediately, but he forced himself to think practically. Sarah, my ranch, my animals, I cannot just leave them for however long this takes. I know, she said quickly, and I would never ask you to abandon your home. But maybe in the spring, when the weather clears and it is easier to travel, maybe then you could come with me. Just long enough to help me confront my uncle, to help me get the law on my side. And I would pay you, Nathan. Once I get control of my property again, I would pay you for your time, for everything you have done for me. I do not want your money, Nathan said, more sharply than he intended. He took a breath, softening his tone. Sorry, I just mean if I help you, it is not going to be because you paid me. It is because it is the right thing to do. Sarah's eyes were bright with unshed tears. So you will help me. Nathan reached across the table and took her hand. It was the first time he had done more than offer his arm or a steadying hand, and the touch sent electricity through him. Her fingers were warm and strong, and they curled around his like they belonged there. Yes, he said simply. When spring comes, we will go to your ranch together. We will face your uncle, and we will get back what belongs to you. A tear escaped and rolled down Sarah's cheek, but she was smiling. Thank you, she whispered, for everything, for giving me shelter when I had none, for treating me with kindness and respect, for believing in me when I did not believe in myself. I do not know how I will ever repay you. You do not need to repay me, Nathan said. He wanted to say more, wanted to tell her that her presence in his house had brought light into his life, that he had come to care for her far more than he should, that the thought of her leaving made his chest ache. But he held back, not sure how she would receive such a confession. Sarah squeezed his hand gently before releasing it, and they cleared the dishes together in comfortable silence. That night, as Nathan lay in his bed listening to the small sounds of Sarah settling down in the loft above, he acknowledged to himself what he had been trying to ignore for weeks. He was falling in love with her. Maybe he had already fallen, and he had no idea what to do about it. Winter settled in earnest over Willits. The snow piled up and the days grew short and cold. Nathan and Sarah spent more time inside, and the forced proximity made Nathan's feelings harder to ignore. Sarah seemed to bloom in the warmth and safety of his home, her laughter coming more easily, her smiles brighter. She started teaching him to cook properly, standing beside him at the stove and guiding his hands through the motions of kneading bread or preparing a proper roast. Nathan treasured these moments, acutely aware of her closeness, of the brush of her arm against his, of the way her hair caught the lamplight. One evening in late December, they were sitting by the fire after dinner when Sarah said quietly, "Tell me about your family." "Your brother, you said he went east," Nathan nodded, poking at the fire with a stick. "Thomas. He is 2 years younger than me. When our father died, I inherited the ranch, and Thomas got a sum of money instead. He used it to go to Sacramento, said he wanted to make something of himself in business rather than ranching. We write occasionally, but we have not seen each other in 3 years. Do you miss him?" Sarah asked. "Sometimes," Nathan admitted. "We were never particularly close, even as children. He always wanted something different than this life. I respect that, but I cannot understand it. This land, this work, it is in my blood." Sarah was quiet for a moment, staring into the flames. My father used to say the same thing. He said some people are born to the land and others are born to wander. He was definitely born to the land, and so was I. Is that why you want your ranch back so badly? Nathan asked. Because it is in your blood, partly, Sarah said, but also because it was his dream. He built that ranch from nothing and he wanted me to carry it on. Letting my uncle steal it feels like I am betraying my father's memory. She turned to look at Nathan. Does that make sense? Perfect sense, Nathan said softly. When my father died, I felt the same way. Like if I did not keep this place going, I would be failing him somehow. Sarah shifted closer to him on the bench they shared, close enough that her shoulder pressed against his. You are a good son, and you will be a good man to whoever you marry someday. Nathan's breath caught. What makes you think I plan to marry? She gave him a sidelong look. Do you not? You are young, you have a good property, you are kind and hardworking. Why would you not want a family? I did not say I did not want it, Nathan said carefully. I just have not found the right woman. What would the right woman be like? Sarah asked, and there was something in her voice, a note of tension that made Nathan's heart race. He turned to look at her, finding her green eyes fixed on his face. The firelight painted gold across her features, and Nathan thought he had never seen anyone more beautiful. She would be strong, he said quietly. Independent. Someone who is not afraid of hard work, who understands what it means to love the land. Someone kind but not weak, someone with her own mind and the courage to speak it. He paused, his eyes never leaving hers. Someone exactly like you. The words hung in the air between them. Sarah's eyes widened, and for a moment Nathan thought he had made a terrible mistake, that he had pushed too far too fast. Then Sarah leaned forward and kissed him. It was gentle at first, tentative, her lips soft against his. Nathan froze for a heartbeat, then wrapped his arms around her and pulled her closer, deepening the kiss. She melted into him with a small sound that made his heart soar, her hands coming up to cup his face. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Sarah rested her forehead against his. I have wanted to do that for weeks, she whispered. Why did you not? Nathan asked, his voice rough. Because I was afraid, she admitted. Afraid you were just being kind, that you did not feel the same way, that I was imposing on your hospitality by developing feelings for you. Nathan laughed, a breathless, joyful sound. Sarah, I have been falling for you since the night I found you in my stable, maybe even from that first moment when you looked up at me with those scared eyes and told me you had nowhere safe to go. She pulled back enough to look at him properly. Really? Really, he confirmed. I just did not want to pressure you, did not want you to feel obligated to return my feelings because I was helping you. Sarah's expression softened. Nathan Emerson, you have never made me feel obligated to do anything. You have given me safety and respect and kindness, and somewhere along the way you gave me your heart, and I am giving you mine in return freely and gladly. They kissed again, slower this time, savoring it. When they finally drew apart, Nathan kept his arms around her, unwilling to let her go. What does this mean? He asked quietly. For us, I mean, for the future. Sarah was quiet for a moment, her fingers tracing patterns on his chest. I still need to go back to my ranch in the spring. I still need to fight for what is mine. But maybe when it is done, when I have my home back, you could come with me. We could run it together, or maybe we could find a way to manage both properties. She looked up at him. I do not have all the answers, Nathan. All I know is that I do not want to lose you. You will not, Nathan said firmly. Whatever we need to do, whatever it takes, we will figure it out together. But Sarah, if we are going to do this, if we are going to be together, I want to do it right. I want to court you properly, to marry you properly. Not because you owe me anything, but because that is how you deserve to be treated. Tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks, but she was smiling. "Are you asking me to marry you, Nathan Emerson?" "Not yet," Nathan said with a small smile of his own. "When I ask you that question, I am going to do it properly with a ring and everything. But I am telling you that I intend to ask if you will have me." "I will have you," Sarah whispered. "Today, tomorrow, whenever you ask. My answer is yes." They sat together by the fire long into the night, talking and kissing and making plans for a future that suddenly seemed bright with possibility. When Sarah finally climbed up to the loft, Nathan lay in his bed with his heart so full he thought it might burst. He had woken up that morning alone, as he had been for years. He was going to sleep knowing he had found the woman he wanted to spend the rest of his life with. The winter passed in a blur of happiness. Nathan and Sarah grew closer every day, learning each other's rhythms, each other's dreams and fears. They worked side by side during the days and sat together by the fire at night, and Nathan felt like he was discovering what it meant to truly share a life with someone. In late January, Nathan rode into Willits to pick up supplies and stopped by the small jewelry shop that had opened the year before. The proprietor, a kindly older man named Mr. Harding, showed him a selection of rings, and Nathan picked out a simple gold band with a small emerald that matched Sarah's eyes. "For someone special?" Mr. Harding asked with a knowing smile. "Very special," Nathan confirmed, tucking the small box carefully into his pocket. He had planned to wait until spring to propose, but the ring burned in his pocket all through the cold ride home. When he walked into the house and saw Sarah at the stove, humming softly to herself as she stirred a pot of stew, he could not wait another day. "Sarah," he said, setting down his bag of supplies. She turned with a smile that lit up her whole face. "You are back. I was starting to worry the snow might have delayed you." Nathan crossed the room and took both her hands in his heart pounding. "I went into town today to get supplies, but I also went to do something else." Sarah's smile faltered, replaced by a look of curiosity and slight apprehension. "What did you do?" Nathan released one of her hands to reach into his pocket, pulling out the small box. When he opened it to reveal the ring, Sarah gasped, her free hand flying to her mouth. "I know I said I would wait, that I would do this properly," Nathan said, his voice shaking slightly. "But I love you, Sarah Turner. I love you more than I knew it was possible to love someone. You have brought light and joy into my life, and I cannot imagine facing another day without you by my side. Will you marry me?" Tears were streaming down Sarah's face, but she was laughing through them. "Yes," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." Nathan slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, then pulled her into his arms and kissed her deeply. Sarah clung to him, and he could feel her trembling, could feel the wetness of her tears on his face. "I love you," she whispered against his lips. "I love you so much, Nathan." "I love you too," he murmured back. "Always." They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Willits, with the minister and his wife as witnesses. Sarah wore a dress she had sewn herself from fabric Nathan had bought in town, a simple creation of deep blue wool that brought out the color of her eyes. Nathan wore his best suit, carefully brushed and pressed for the occasion. It was a small, quiet ceremony, but it felt more real and meaningful to Nathan than any grand celebration could have been. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife and Nathan kissed his bride, he felt like his life was finally complete. They celebrated with a dinner at the town's only restaurant, then rode back to the ranch in the late afternoon light, the winter sun painting the snow gold and pink. That night, Nathan carried Sarah over the threshold of his house, their house now, and they consummated their marriage with tenderness and passion, learning each other in this new way, cementing the bond between them. In the weeks that followed, They settled into married life with an ease that surprised both of them. Sarah moved her few belongings down from the loft into Nathan's bedroom, their bedroom now, and they fell asleep each night wrapped in each other's arms. Nathan had never been happier, and he could see the same joy reflected in Sarah's eyes every time she looked at him. But as winter slowly gave way to spring, they both knew they had to address the question that had been hanging over them since they had fallen in love. What were they going to do about Sarah's ranch? It was early March when they finally sat down to discuss it seriously. The snow was beginning to melt, revealing the brown grass beneath, and the days were noticeably longer. They sat at their kitchen table with cups of coffee, and Nathan took Sarah's hand across the rough wood. "We need to talk about your ranch," he said gently. "About when we are going to deal with your uncle." Sarah nodded, her face growing serious. "I know. I have been thinking about it constantly. I want my home back, Nathan. I want what my father left to me. But I am also terrified of confronting my uncle, of what he might do." "He cannot do anything if we do it right," Nathan said. "We will go to a lawyer first, make sure your claim is legally sound. Then we will go to the sheriff, make sure he knows about the situation and has orders to intervene if your uncle tries anything. And only then will we go to the ranch itself." "And what if my uncle refuses to leave?" Sarah asked quietly. "What if he fights?" "Then we will deal with that when it happens," Nathan said firmly. "But Sarah, you cannot let fear stop you from claiming what is rightfully yours. Your father wanted you to have that ranch to continue his legacy. We owe it to his memory to fight for it." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, staring down at her coffee. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. "What if I lose you? What if something happens to you because you are helping me? I could not bear that, Nathan. You are more important to me than any property." Nathan stood and moved around the table, pulling Sarah to her feet and into his arms. "You are not going to lose me," he said fiercely. "I promise you, Sarah. I did not find you and marry you just to leave you. We are going to do this together, and we are both going to be fine." She clung to him, her face pressed against his chest. "I am so afraid," she whispered. "I know," Nathan murmured, stroking her hair. "But we are going to do this anyway because that is what brave people do. They are afraid, but they act anyway." Sarah pulled back to look up at him, and Nathan was struck once again by the strength he saw in her eyes, the courage that had allowed her to flee her uncle in the first place, to trust a stranger, to build a new life from nothing. "All right," she said, her voice stronger. "Let us do it. Let us get my ranch back." They spent the next week making preparations. Nathan arranged for a neighbor, an older rancher named Bill Thompson, to look after his property while they were gone. Sarah wrote out everything she could remember about her father's will and the circumstances of his death, creating a record they could show to a lawyer. They packed carefully, taking enough supplies for a week or two of travel, and made sure Nathan's pistol was clean and loaded, just in case. On a bright morning in late March, they set out, riding together on Duke and Willow. It was a 2-day journey to Ukiah if they pushed hard, but they took their time, camping overnight and reaching the town in the early afternoon of their second day. Ukiah was larger than Willits, with several streets of shops and houses and a proper courthouse. They found a hotel first, securing a room, then asked for directions to a lawyer's office. The clerk at the hotel recommended a man named James Fitzgerald, saying he was honest and experienced in property law. Fitzgerald's office was above a dry goods store on the main street. He was a middle-aged man with graying hair and sharp eyes, and he listened intently as Sarah explained her situation, occasionally asking questions or making notes. When she had finished, he sat back in his chair and steepled his fingers. "Mrs. Emerson, based on what you have told me, You have a strong legal claim to your father's property. If the will was properly executed and witnessed, which it sounds like it was, then your uncle has no right to it whatsoever. The challenge will be enforcing that claim. What do you suggest?" Nathan asked. Fitzgerald considered. "First, I will need to obtain a copy of your father's will from the lawyer who drew it up. You said he was based in San Francisco." Sarah nodded. "His name was Robert Chen, the same family name as our housekeeper. He was her cousin, which is how my father met him." "Good," Fitzgerald said. "I will send a telegram immediately requesting a certified copy. While we wait for that, I suggest you speak with the sheriff here in Ukiah. Explain the situation. Make sure he is aware that there may be trouble when you try to reclaim your property." "Sarah mentioned that her uncle has friends among the local law enforcement," Nathan said carefully. Fitzgerald's expression grew grim. "That complicates matters, but it does not make them impossible. The sheriff may have personal friendships, but he is still bound by the law. Once we have the documentation proving your ownership, he will have no legal choice but to support your claim." They thanked Fitzgerald and left his office, walking together down the street toward the sheriff's office. Nathan kept a protective hand on Sarah's back, feeling the tension in her body. He knew how hard this was for her, returning to the town where her uncle had power and influence. The sheriff was a heavy-set man in his 50s with a thick mustache and a skeptical expression. He listened to their story with obvious reluctance, and when Sarah mentioned her uncle's name, Nathan saw something flicker across the sheriff's face. Not quite fear, but definitely unease. "Your uncle is a respected member of this community," the sheriff said slowly. "I find it hard to believe he would do what you are accusing him of, Miss Turner." "It is Mrs. Emerson now," Sarah said quietly. "And I am not accusing him, I am telling you what happened. He locked me in my room and told me I would marry my cousin whether I wanted to or not. I had to escape through a window to get away." The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. "That is a serious allegation. Do you have any proof?" "We will have proof once the lawyer gets a copy of my father's will," Nathan said, keeping his voice level despite the anger simmering in his chest. "That will show that Sarah is the legal owner of the property and that her uncle has no claim to it." "Well, until you have that proof, there is not much I can do," the sheriff said. "I cannot just go ordering a man off his property based on allegations." "It is not his property," Sarah said, her voice rising. "It is mine. My father left it to me." "So you say," the sheriff replied. "But like I said, until you have legal documentation, I cannot act." Nathan could see Sarah trembling with frustration and anger, and he put a steadying hand on her arm. "Fine," he said. "We will get the documentation, and when we do, we will be back and you will do your job." They left the sheriff's office, and Sarah was quiet as they walked back to the hotel, her face pale and set. Nathan did not try to force conversation, just stayed close to her, a silent presence of support. In their hotel room, Sarah finally broke down, collapsing onto the bed with her face in her hands. "He did not believe me," she said, her voice muffled. "The sheriff, he did not believe a word I said." Nathan sat beside her and pulled her into his arms. "It does not matter if he believed you. Once we have the legal documents, he will not have a choice. The law will be on our side." "But what if it is not enough?" Sarah asked, looking up at him with tear-filled eyes. "What if my uncle fights anyway and the sheriff lets him because they are friends?" "Then we will deal with that," Nathan said firmly. "Sarah, listen to me. You are not alone in this. You have me and we have the law on our side and we are going to see this through to the end. Your uncle does not get to steal your inheritance. He does not get to win." Sarah buried her face in his chest, and Nathan held her while she cried, wishing he could take this burden from her, wishing he could fix everything with his own two hands. But this was not something that could be solved with physical strength. This required patience and legal maneuvering and faith that justice would prevail. It took 3 days for the telegram reply to arrive from San Francisco. Fitzgerald sent a message to their hotel, asking them to come to his office immediately. They hurried through the streets, and Nathan could feel Sarah's tension, her desperate hope that this would be the break they needed. Fitzgerald was smiling when they entered his office, and he held up a sheaf of papers. "Good news," he said. "I have a certified copy of your father's will, Mrs. Emerson. It is clear and unambiguous. The ranch and all its assets were left to you without condition. Your uncle has no claim whatsoever." Sarah's knees seemed to buckle with relief, and Nathan steadied her, his own heart surging with hope. "What do we do now?" he asked. "Now we go to the sheriff," Fitzgerald said, "and we demand that he enforce Mrs. Emerson's legal rights as the property owner. If he refuses, I will file a complaint with the territorial court, but I doubt it will come to that. No lawman wants to be on the wrong side of a clear property dispute." The three of them walked together to the sheriff's office. This time, armed with the legal documents, the conversation went very differently. The sheriff read through the will carefully, his expression growing more resigned with each page. When he finished, he set the papers down with a heavy sigh. "All right," he said. "The law is clear. The property belongs to you, Mrs. Emerson. I will accompany you to the ranch and inform your uncle that he needs to vacate the premises." "When?" Nathan asked. "Tomorrow morning," the sheriff said. "Give me time to gather a couple deputies. If your uncle is as difficult as you suggest, I want backup." They spent another restless night at the hotel. Sarah barely slept, tossing and turning in Nathan's arms, and he held her close, whispering reassurances. When dawn finally came, they dressed carefully, Nathan checking his pistol one more time even though he prayed he would not need it. The sheriff and 2 deputies met them outside the hotel, all 3 lawmen armed and looking serious. Fitzgerald had decided to come as well, riding in a small buggy with all the legal documents in a satchel at his side. The ride to Sarah's ranch took about an hour. As they approached, Nathan could see it was a substantial property, larger than his own, with a sprawling ranch house and multiple outbuildings. Horses grazed in a distant pasture, and cattle dotted the hillsides. It was beautiful, and Nathan understood even more why Sarah was fighting so hard to reclaim it. They rode up to the main house and dismounted. Nathan stayed close to Sarah, his hand near his pistol, as the sheriff climbed the steps to the porch and knocked firmly on the door. It was opened by a middle-aged man with cold eyes and a cruel set to his mouth. He looked at the sheriff with a smile that faded when he saw Sarah standing in the yard. "What is this?" he demanded. "Mr. Turner," the sheriff said formally. "I am here to inform you that this property belongs to your niece, Sarah Emerson, formerly Sarah Turner. Her father's will is clear on this matter. You have no legal right to be here, and I am asking you to vacate the premises immediately." Sarah's uncle, whose name Nathan learned was Robert Turner, went red in the face. "This is ridiculous. That girl has no idea how to run a ranch. Her father left it to the family, and I am family. I have a right to be here." "The will says otherwise," Fitzgerald said, stepping forward with the documents. "Would you like to read it yourself?" Robert snatched the papers and scanned them, his face growing redder. "This is a forgery," he spat. "My brother would never have left everything to a worthless girl." "Do not speak about my wife that way," Nathan said, his voice low and dangerous. Robert's eyes snapped to Nathan and his lip curled. "And who are you?" "Some drifter she picked up to fight her battles." "I am her husband," Nathan said. "And I am warning you now to watch your mouth." "Mr. Turner," the sheriff interrupted, his voice hard. The will is legitimate and legal. You need to gather your belongings and leave. If you refuse, I will arrest you for trespassing." For a moment, Nathan thought Robert might actually refuse, might actually force a confrontation. The man's hand moved toward his belt, where Nathan could see he was carrying a gun. The deputies tensed, their hands moving to their own weapons. Then a woman's voice called out from inside the house. "Robert, do not be a fool." An older Chinese woman appeared in the doorway, her face lined with age but her eyes sharp. Sarah gasped. Mrs. Chen, the housekeeper, looked at Sarah, and her stern expression softened into something like relief. "Miss Sarah, you are alive. I am so glad." "You know this woman?" Robert demanded. "I have worked for this family for 30 years, Mrs. Chen said calmly. "And I know that Sarah's father wanted her to have this ranch. Except that you have lost, Robert. Leave with some dignity." The fight seemed to go out of Robert Turner at that moment. He threw the will papers onto the porch and turned to go back into the house. "I will get my things," he said tersely, "but this is not over." "Actually, it is," Fitzgerald said. "Any further harassment of Mrs. Emerson will result in legal action." It took Robert and his son, Sarah's cousin, about an hour to pack their belongings and load them into a wagon. Nathan watched them the entire time, never letting his guard down. When they finally drove away from the ranch, Robert paused to look back at Sarah. "You will fail," he called out. "You are a woman. You have no idea how to run this place." "I learned from the best," Sarah called back, her voice strong. "My father taught me everything he knew, and I have a good man at my side. We will do fine." Robert spat on the ground and drove away without another word. The sheriff and his deputies stayed for another hour, making sure the situation was truly resolved, before riding back to town. Fitzgerald followed soon after, promising to file all the necessary paperwork to ensure Sarah's claim was officially recorded. And then, finally, Nathan and Sarah were alone on her ranch with only Mrs. Chen watching from the porch. Sarah stood in the yard, staring up at the house she had grown up in, and tears streamed down her face. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it." Nathan wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on top of her head. "You did it. You fought for your home and you won." Mrs. Chen came down from the porch and approached them, and Sarah broke away from Nathan to embrace the older woman fiercely. "Thank you," Sarah said. "Thank you for helping me escape, for standing up to my uncle. I could not have done any of this without you." "Your father would be proud of you," Mrs. Chen said, patting Sarah's back. "Now come inside. Let me make you some tea and you can tell me everything that has happened since you left." They spent the rest of the day settling in. Mrs. Chen had kept the house running despite Robert's presence, and everything was clean and in order. She made a wonderful dinner, and as they ate at the large dining table, Sarah told her about meeting Nathan, about their marriage, about the life they had built together over the winter. That night, Nathan and Sarah lay together in the bedroom that had been Sarah's as a girl in the house where she had grown up. She was quiet, and Nathan could feel the emotions rolling through her, a mix of triumph and grief and relief. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. "I keep expecting to see my father," Sarah whispered. "To have him walk through the door and tell me I did well. I wish he could have met you, Nathan. He would have liked you." "I wish I could have met him too," Nathan said, pulling her closer. "He raised an incredible daughter." They were quiet for a while, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of Sarah's childhood home. Finally, Sarah spoke again. "What do we do now? You have your ranch and I have mine. How do we manage both?" It was a question they had been avoiding, but now it had to be faced. Nathan had been thinking about it all day, turning over possibilities in his mind. "I have an idea," he said slowly, "but I want to know what you think before I say anything else." "What do you want, Sarah?" In your heart, if you could have anything, what would it be? Sarah was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was small, almost ashamed. I want to live here. This is my home, Nathan. This is where I grew up, where my father's memory lives. But I also do not want you to have to give up your ranch, the land your father left you. I do not want you to sacrifice your home for mine. Nathan felt a warmth spread through his chest. He had been hoping she would say that, because he had realized over the past few weeks that he was willing to make that sacrifice if it meant Sarah could be happy. Then we live here, he said simply. We make this ranch our main home. I can sell my property or maybe rent it to Bill Thompson. He has been eyeing those 40 acres for years. Either way, I am not attached to the land the way you are to this place. My home is wherever you are. Sarah turned in his arms to face him, her eyes wide. You would do that, give up your ranch for me, in a heartbeat, Nathan said. Sarah, I love you more than I love any piece of land, and besides, your ranch is bigger with more potential. We can build something really special here together. This can be our legacy. Fresh tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks. I love you so much, she whispered. How did I get so lucky to find you? I think I am the lucky one, Nathan murmured, kissing her softly. Now let us get some sleep. We have a ranch to run starting tomorrow. The next few months were a whirlwind of activity. Nathan rode back to Willits to arrange the sale of his property to Bill Thompson, who was thrilled to expand his own holdings. Nathan kept his animals, bringing them down to Sarah's ranch along with his tools and the few possessions he wanted to keep. He said goodbye to the small house he had built with his father, feeling a pang of loss but also a sense of rightness. His life was moving forward, and Sarah was his future. Back at the ranch, they threw themselves into the work. Sarah showed Nathan her father's breeding program, explaining the bloodlines and her vision for expanding it. They hired 2 ranch hands to help with the daily work, young men from town who were good with horses and cattle. Mrs. Chen continued to run the household, though Sarah and Nathan both insisted on helping with cooking and cleaning despite her protests. The ranch began to thrive under their joint management. Sarah had inherited her father's eye for good horse flesh, and Nathan brought practical ranching experience and a willingness to try new methods. They expanded the cattle herd and broke several young horses to sell at the market in San Francisco. By autumn, the ranch was profitable again, earning more than it had in the last year of Robert's occupation. Sarah bloomed with the success, her confidence growing as she proved to herself and everyone else that she was more than capable of running the property her father had left her. In December, Sarah came to Nathan with news that made his heart soar. She was pregnant. They were going to have a child in the spring. Nathan swept her up in his arms and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. We are going to be parents, he said, setting her down gently and cupping her face in his hands. Sarah, I cannot believe it. This is the best news I have ever heard. Are you happy? She asked, smiling through happy tears. Happy does not even begin to cover it, Nathan said, kissing her deeply. I love you, and I am going to love our child. We are going to be a family. The pregnancy was not easy. Sarah suffered from morning sickness for months, and as her belly grew, she found it harder to do the physical ranch work she was used to. Nathan insisted she take it easy, taking on more of the work himself, and hiring an additional hand to help through the winter and spring. Mrs. Chen fussed over Sarah constantly, making sure she ate properly and rested enough. Nathan found himself grateful beyond words for the older woman's presence. She had become family to them, a beloved grandmother figure who kept their household running smoothly. In late May of 1879, Sarah went into labor. It was a long, difficult birth that lasted through the night and into the next day. Nathan stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand and wiping the sweat from her forehead, feeling more helpless than he had ever felt in his life. When the baby finally came, a healthy boy with a powerful set of lungs, Nathan wept with relief and joy. Sarah held their son against her chest, exhausted but radiant, and looked up at Nathan with so much love in her eyes it took his breath away. "We need a name," she said softly. They had discussed names for months, but now, looking down at their son's tiny, perfect face, Nathan knew exactly what he wanted to call him. "Thomas," he said, "after my brother. Thomas James Emerson." Sarah smiled. "Thomas James, I love it. Hello, Thomas. Welcome to the world." Parenthood transformed them both in ways they had not expected. Nathan discovered a depth of love and protectiveness he had not known he was capable of, and Sarah revealed a nurturing side that complemented her strength perfectly. They took turns walking the floor with Thomas when he cried in the night, worked together to figure out feeding schedules and diaper changes, and marveled at every tiny milestone their son achieved. Mrs. Chen adored the baby, rocking him for hours and singing to him in Chinese. The ranch hands built a beautiful cradle, and Sarah's childhood bedroom became a nursery, filled with the sounds of a baby's laughter and cries. Life settled into a new rhythm. Nathan and Sarah managed the ranch together, with Nathan taking on more of the physical work while Sarah handled the business side, keeping the books and managing their finances. They hired additional help as the ranch continued to grow, and within 2 years, they had earned enough to buy an adjacent property, expanding their holdings significantly. Thomas grew into a bright, energetic child with his mother's green eyes and his father's dark hair. He toddled after Nathan around the ranch, insisting on helping with chores even when he was too small to be of much use. Sarah would watch them from the porch, her hand resting on her belly where a second child was growing, and feel a contentment so deep it brought tears to her eyes. Their second child, a daughter they named Emma Rose, was born in the spring of 1882. She was quieter than her brother had been, more contemplative, with Sarah's dark hair and Nathan's gray eyes. Thomas, now 3 years old, was fascinated by his baby sister and appointed himself her protector, always wanting to hold her and show her his toys. The years passed in a blur of work and family life. The ranch continued to prosper, and Nathan and Sarah's reputation as skilled horse breeders spread throughout Northern California. They added more land, built new barns, and hired more hands until they were running one of the most successful ranches in the region. But through all the growth and success, what mattered most to Nathan was the life he had built with Sarah. Every morning, he woke up next to the woman he loved. Every evening, he sat down to dinner with his family. Every night, he fell asleep knowing he had found what many men spent their whole lives searching for: a true home, a true partnership, a true love. Sarah felt the same way. Sometimes she would think back to that night she had hidden in Nathan's stable, terrified and alone with nowhere safe to go. She thought about how different her life might have been if Nathan had turned her away, if he had not taken a chance on a frightened stranger. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Nathan and Sarah took a rare day away from the ranch, riding up into the hills above their property to a spot that overlooked the valley. It was a beautiful spring day, with wildflowers blooming across the meadows and the sky a brilliant blue. They spread a blanket under an oak tree and lay together, looking up at the clouds drifting past. Thomas and Emma were home with Mrs. Chen, giving Nathan and Sarah this precious time alone. "You ever regret it?" Sarah asked suddenly. "Giving up your ranch, building a life here instead of there?" Nathan turned his head to look at her, surprised. "Never, not for a single moment. Why, do you?" "No," Sarah said quickly. No, I was just thinking about how much you sacrificed for me, and I wanted to make sure you do not have any regrets. Nathan rolled onto his side and propped himself up on his elbow so he could see her face clearly. Sarah, you need to understand something. I did not sacrifice anything. I chose you. I chose this life, and it has been the best choice I have ever made. Tears gathered in Sarah's eyes. I love you so much. Sometimes I still cannot believe you are real, that we have this beautiful life together. Believe it, Nathan said, leaning down to kiss her, because I am not going anywhere. You are stuck with me for the rest of our lives. Sarah laughed through her tears. Good. That is exactly how long I want you. They spent the afternoon there on the hillside, talking about their children, their plans for the ranch, their dreams for the future. When the sun began to sink toward the horizon, they rode back down to the ranch house, where Mrs. Chen had dinner ready and their children were waiting. That night, after the children were asleep, Nathan and Sarah stood on their porch, looking out over the land they had built together. Sarah leaned back against Nathan's chest, and he wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. We have a good life, Sarah said softly. We have a great life, Nathan corrected, and it was true. They had weathered storms and faced challenges, but through it all their love had remained constant, the foundation upon which everything else was built. From that first night when Sarah had trusted Nathan with her life, to this moment standing together on their porch, they had chosen each other again and again. As the stars came out overhead and the night sounds of the ranch rose around them, Nathan reflected on the strange and wonderful path that had brought them here. He had found Sarah sleeping in his stable, desperate and alone, and taken a chance on helping her. That choice had transformed both their lives in ways neither could have predicted. Sarah had said she had nowhere safe to go that night, but Nathan had given her safety, and in return, she had given him everything. Love, family, a purpose that went beyond just working the land day after day. Together, they had built something that would last long after they were gone, a legacy of love and hard work and determination. The ranch continued to thrive over the following years. Thomas and Emma grew up strong and capable, learning the business from their parents and developing their own skills with horses and cattle. By the time Thomas was 10 and Emma was 7, they were both accomplished riders and valuable helpers around the ranch. In 1886, Sarah gave birth to their third child, another son they named William Joseph. He was a sweet-natured baby who rarely cried, content to be passed around from sibling to sibling, all of whom doted on him. Mrs. Chen remained with them, growing older but no less sharp-minded. She had become such an integral part of their family that Sarah could not imagine life without her. When she finally passed away peacefully in her sleep in 1889, they buried her on the ranch with a ceremony that honored both her Christian faith and her Chinese heritage. Sarah grieved deeply for the woman who had been a second mother to her, but she found comfort in knowing that Mrs. Chen had lived to see Sarah happy and successful, had lived to know and love all three of Sarah's children. Mrs. Chen had died knowing she had helped save Sarah's life that night she gave her the key, and that her bravery had led to all of this. The children grew, and the ranch grew with them. Thomas showed an aptitude for the business side of things, while Emma proved to have an extraordinary gift with horses, better even than Sarah had been at her age. William was still young, but he was already showing signs of being a natural leader, organizing the other children in elaborate games and adventures. Nathan and Sarah aged gracefully together, their love deepening with every year. They weathered the challenges that came with ranching: droughts, economic downturns, occasional conflicts with neighbors, but they faced everything as a team, their partnership unshakable. On their 10th anniversary, Nathan gave Sarah a necklace with 3 small emeralds, one for each of their children. She wore it every day, treasuring not just the beauty of it but what it represented. The family they had built, the life they had created from nothing but love and determination. On their 15th anniversary, Sarah gave Nathan a watch engraved with words from their wedding vows and a landscape of their ranch detailed on the back. He carried it in his pocket everywhere, checking the time and thinking of her dozens of times throughout each day. The years continued to pass, bringing both joy and sorrow. They lost friends, faced setbacks, celebrated victories. But through it all, Nathan and Sarah remained each other's constant, their love the North Star by which they navigated all of life's challenges. In 1895, when Thomas was 16, he began courting a girl from town, the daughter of the local banker. Sarah watched her eldest son fall in love and was transported back to those early days with Nathan, remembering how it felt to discover that kind of all-consuming emotion for the first time. "They are so young," she said to Nathan one night as they got ready for bed. "We were young too," Nathan reminded her. "You were only 21 when I found you in my stable." "Were we ever that young?" Sarah wondered, studying her face in the mirror. She was nearly 40 now, with fine lines around her eyes and threads of silver beginning to show in her dark hair. But when Nathan came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, she felt just as young as she had that first night. "We are still young," Nathan said, kissing the side of her neck. "We have years ahead of us, Sarah. Years to watch our children grow and marry and give us grandchildren. Years to keep building this ranch. Years to keep loving each other." Sarah turned in his arms and kissed him deeply. "I like the sound of that." Emma, meanwhile, had no interest in romance. At 13, she was wholly focused on the horses, spending every free moment in the barns, working with the young stock, training and exercising them. She had her mother's determination and her father's patience, and Nathan and Sarah both knew she was going to do great things. William, at 9 years old, was still figuring out who he would become. He loved the ranch but also loved books, often found reading on the porch when he should have been doing chores. Sarah saw echoes of herself in him, that same hunger for knowledge, that same sense that the world was bigger than just this one place. As the century drew to a close, the ranch was more successful than ever. They had weathered economic depressions and come out stronger, had expanded their holdings until they owned more than 2,000 acres, had built a reputation that extended far beyond California. Buyers came from as far as Colorado and Texas to purchase their horses. But despite all the success and growth, what Nathan and Sarah valued most was still the simple things. Dinner together as a family every night, lazy Sunday afternoons when they could put aside work and just enjoy being together, quiet evenings on the porch after the children were in bed, talking about anything and everything. In the fall of 1899, on the 21st anniversary of the night Sarah had hidden in Nathan's stable, they threw a party. It was ostensibly to celebrate the ranch's success, but really it was a celebration of their love story, of the family they had built, of the life they had created together. Friends and neighbors came from miles around. The ranch hands helped set up tables in the yard, and Sarah and the children prepared a feast. There was music and dancing, and as the sun set, Nathan took Sarah's hand and led her out to dance under the stars, just as they had at their wedding so many years before. 21 years, Sarah said, resting her head on Nathan's shoulder as they swayed to the music. "It feels like no time at all and also like forever." "I know exactly what you mean," Nathan said. "I still remember finding you in my stable like it was yesterday. I remember how scared you looked, how brave you were even in your fear. And I remember thinking you might send me away, might turn me into whoever was looking for me," Sarah said. "But instead, you gave me shelter and food and safety. You gave me hope when I had none. You gave me everything." Nathan pulled back to look at her face, illuminated by the lantern light and the stars above. She was still the most beautiful woman he had ever seen, made more beautiful by the years they had shared, by the life they had built, by the love that had only grown stronger with time. "You gave me everything too," he said softly. "A purpose, a family, a reason to wake up happy every morning. I was content before you, but I was not truly happy. You brought joy into my life, Sarah. You and our children, you are everything that matters." They kissed there under the stars, surrounded by their friends and family, their children watching with a mixture of embarrassment and delight, the ranch they had built together standing strong around them. The new century brought new challenges and opportunities. Thomas married his sweetheart in 1902 and brought her to live on the ranch, taking on more and more of the day-to-day management as Nathan and Sarah began to step back slightly, not retiring but allowing themselves to slow down a bit. Emma, true to form, showed no interest in marriage but instead threw herself even more deeply into the work with the horses. By her 20th birthday, she was widely recognized as one of the best horse trainers in California, and people sent their most difficult animals to her. William surprised everyone by deciding to go to college, the first in their family to do so. He went to San Francisco to study law, saying he wanted to help people like his mother, people whose legal rights were threatened by those with more power and fewer scruples. Sarah was so proud of him she cried for days. In 1905, Thomas and his wife gave Nathan and Sarah their first grandchild, a little girl named Charlotte. Holding his granddaughter for the first time, Nathan felt his heart expand in a way he had not thought possible. He had thought he could not love more than he already did, but apparently, there was always room for more. Sarah was a doting grandmother, spending hours with Charlotte, teaching her to bake and garden, telling her stories about the ranch and about her great-grandfather who had built it all from nothing. More grandchildren followed over the years. Thomas and his wife had 3 children in total, and Emma eventually surprised everyone by falling in love with a horse trainer she met at a competition in Sacramento. She married him in 1908, and they had twin boys the following year. William married a woman he met in law school, and they settled in San Francisco, where he opened a practice focused on property rights and inheritance law. They had 2 children, and though they lived far from the ranch, they visited often, bringing the sounds of childhood laughter back to the house where Sarah had grown up. Nathan and Sarah grew old together, their hair turning gray, their bodies slowing down, but their love remaining as strong as ever. They would sit on the porch in the evenings, holding hands and watching the sun set over the land they had built together, surrounded by the sounds of their children and grandchildren. In 1915, on their 37th wedding anniversary, Nathan and Sarah took another ride up to their special spot in the hills above the ranch. They were in their 60s now, and the ride was harder than it used to be, but they made it, spreading their blanket under the same oak tree where they had spent so many afternoons over the years. "We have had a good life," Nathan said, lying back and looking up at the sky. "The best life," Sarah agreed, settling down beside him with her head on his shoulder. "Better than I ever dreamed possible when I was hiding in your stable all those years ago." "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" Nathan asked. "If you had chosen a different stable, if I had turned you away, if any one of 1,000 small things had happened differently." "Sometimes," Sarah admitted. "But then I realized that it does not matter, because this is what happened. We found each other and we built this beautiful life together. Everything else is just speculation." They were quiet for a while, listening to the wind in the trees and the distant sounds of the ranch below them. Finally, Nathan spoke again. "Sarah, I want you to know something. These past 37 years with you have been the greatest gift of my life. Every day I have woken up grateful that you came into my life, that you trusted me, that you chose to build a life with me. I love you more now than I did the day we married, and I did not think that was possible." Sarah lifted her head to look at him, tears streaming down her face. "Nathan Emerson, you have been my rock, my partner, my love, and my best friend. You saved my life that night in your stable, and then you gave me a reason to live. I love you with everything I am, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond." They kissed, and it was as sweet and meaningful as their first kiss had been all those years ago. When they finally pulled apart, they lay together in comfortable silence, holding hands and watching the clouds drift by overhead. The years continued to pass, bringing both joy and sorrow. Nathan and Sarah celebrated their 40th anniversary, surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and a few great-grandchildren. The ranch continued to thrive under Thomas's management, with Emma's horses gaining recognition across the country and William's legal practice helping countless people protect their rights and property. In 1920, Nathan fell ill with pneumonia. For weeks, Sarah barely left his side, holding his hand and talking to him about their life together, about their children and grandchildren, about all the memories they had made over more than 4 decades of marriage. Nathan recovered, but he was weaker after that, his body finally showing the wear of a lifetime of hard physical labor. Sarah was dealing with her own health issues, arthritis that made her hands stiff and painful. But they faced this new challenge as they had faced everything else, together. They spent their days quietly now, sitting on the porch and watching the life of the ranch continue around them. Their children and grandchildren visited often, filling the house with noise and laughter and love. Nathan and Sarah would sit together, hands clasped, and feel a deep sense of contentment. They had built something that would last long after they were gone. On a beautiful spring morning in 1923, Nathan and Sarah woke up together in the bedroom they had shared for 45 years. They were both 73 years old now, their bodies tired but their spirits still strong. They had breakfast on the porch, watching the sun rise over the hills, and talked about the plans for the day. Thomas came by with news that one of Emma's horses had just won a major competition in Los Angeles. William had written to say he was arguing a case before the state Supreme Court. Charlotte, their eldest grandchild, was engaged to be married in the summer. "We are very blessed," Sarah said, leaning back in her rocking chair. "We are," Nathan agreed. "We have built something good, Sarah, something that will last." She reached over and took his hand, their fingers interlacing in a gesture they had repeated thousands of times over the decades. "We have indeed." They sat together for a long time, watching the ranch come to life around them, listening to the sounds of horses and cattle and people going about their daily work. This was their legacy, not just the land and the buildings and the animals, but the family they had raised, the values they had instilled, the love they had cultivated. As the years continued to pass into their mid-70s and beyond, Nathan and Sarah remained devoted to each other, each day a gift they did not take for granted. They had both lost friends and contemporaries, had attended too many funerals, and they understood that their time together was precious and finite. But they did not dwell on sadness or fear. Instead, they focused on gratitude for every sunrise they witnessed together, for every meal they shared, for every conversation that deepened their understanding of each other, even after nearly 5 decades of marriage. On their 50th anniversary in 1928, The family threw them a grand celebration. People came from all over California to honor Nathan and Sarah Emerson, the couple who had built one of the most successful ranches in the region, who had raised 3 accomplished children, who had been married for half a century and still looked at each other with love in their eyes. There were speeches and toasts, gifts and well wishes. But the moment Nathan treasured most was late in the evening when he and Sarah slipped away from the party, walking hand in hand down to the barn where he had first found her 50 years before. "You remember?" he asked, stopping in the doorway. "Every detail," Sarah said. "I was so scared, so alone. And then you appeared and I thought you might hurt me or turn me in, but instead you saved me." "We saved each other," Nathan corrected gently. "You brought meaning to my life, Sarah. Purpose and love and joy." She turned to face him, taking both his hands in hers. 50 years, she said wonderingly. 50 years of loving you, of building a life with you, of being your partner in everything. It has been the greatest adventure of my life." "Mine too," Nathan said. "And if I could do it all again, I would not change a single thing." They kissed there in the barn where their story had begun. 2 people in their 70s who loved each other as deeply as they had when they were young. Then they walked back to the party hand in hand, ready to celebrate with their family and friends, ready to embrace whatever time they had left together. The years rolled on gently. Nathan and Sarah both passed their 80th birthdays, a remarkable achievement for their time. They were slowing down considerably now, their bodies tired and worn, but their minds remained sharp, and their love remained constant. Thomas had fully taken over the ranch, running it with the same dedication and skill his parents had shown. Emma's reputation as a horse trainer had made her famous throughout the West. William had become one of the most respected property lawyers in California, helping countless people protect their rights just as he had vowed to do. The grandchildren were grown now, with children of their own, and the great-grandchildren filled the ranch with energy and laughter. Nathan and Sarah's legacy extended far beyond just the land they owned. It was in the values they had instilled, the love they had modeled, the strength and determination they had demonstrated in building their life together against all odds. In the spring of 1931, Nathan's health began to fail more seriously. He had lived a long, full life, but his body was finally giving out. Sarah stayed by his side constantly, reading to him, talking to him, holding his hand. Their children and grandchildren came to visit, and Nathan told them all how proud he was of them, how much he loved them. On a sunny afternoon in late May, surrounded by his family, Nathan Emerson passed away peacefully at the age of 81. Sarah was holding his hand when he took his last breath, and though her heart was breaking, she felt a sense of peace. They had had 53 beautiful years together, and she knew he had died happy, fulfilled, surrounded by love. She was devastated by his loss, but she took comfort in their children and grandchildren, in the life they had built together that continued on even without him. She would sit on the porch in her rocking chair, looking out over the ranch, and talk to Nathan as if he were still there beside her. "We did well," she would say. "Look at what we built, Nathan. Look at our family, our legacy. You should be so proud." Sarah lived for 2 more years after Nathan's death, remaining sharp and engaged despite her grief. She spent her time with her family, telling stories about Nathan and their life together, making sure the next generations understood where they had come from and what their grandparents had overcome to build this life. On a warm autumn evening in 1933, Sarah sat on the porch watching the sunset. She was 83 years old, and she felt tired in a way that went deeper than physical exhaustion. She was ready, she realized, ready to rejoin Nathan wherever he had gone. Thomas found her there the next morning, still sitting in her rocking chair, a peaceful expression on her face. She had passed away in her sleep, looking out over the land she had fought so hard to keep, the ranch that had been her father's dream and had become her legacy. They buried Sarah next to Nathan in the small family cemetery on the property, under the oak trees where they had spent so many afternoons together. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people whose lives they had touched over the decades, and everyone agreed that Sarah and Nathan Emerson had been extraordinary people who had lived an extraordinary life. Their story became family legend, passed down through the generations. The tale of how Nathan had found Sarah sleeping in his stable, how she had said she had nowhere safe to go, how he had taken her in, and they had fallen in love and built an empire together. It was a love story for the ages, a reminder of the power of compassion and kindness, of the courage it takes to trust and to love. The ranch continued to thrive under the management of their descendants, growing and evolving with the times but always maintaining the core values that Nathan and Sarah had instilled: hard work, integrity, respect for the land, and above all, love for family. More than a century after that night when a frightened young woman had hidden in Nathan Emerson's stable, their great-great-grandchildren still worked the land, still bred horses, still told the story of Sarah and Nathan with pride and reverence. The original ranch house still stood, carefully maintained, with a plaque by the door commemorating the extraordinary couple who had built it all. And if you walked down to the old barn on a quiet evening, you might imagine you could still feel their presence there, in the spot where their love story had begun, where a cowboy had found a woman sleeping in his stable, where she had said, "I had nowhere safe to go," and where he had offered her not just shelter but a future, a partnership, and a love that lasted a lifetime and beyond. Their story was one of courage and kindness, of love conquering fear, of two people choosing each other again and again through all of life's joys and sorrows. It was a reminder that sometimes the most important choices we make are the ones to show compassion to strangers, to take a chance on love, to build something lasting together. Nathan and Sarah Emerson had lived fully, loved deeply, and left behind a legacy that would endure for generations. Their love story, born in a stable on a desperate night in 1878, had blossomed into something beautiful and lasting, a testament to the power of love, faith, and determination. And so their story ended, but their legacy lived on, in the land they had worked, in the children they had raised, in the values they had instilled, and most of all in the enduring example of what true love and partnership could accomplish when two people faced the world together, hand in hand, heart to heart, from that first frightening night until their final peaceful days.